All right, so Darin Foss of DK Fitness. Thanks for joining, bud.
Absolutely, anytime.
You and I go way back many years. You're the person who started me on my fitness journey. And why don't we just start out, and since nobody else knows, what's your background? How did you get to do what you're doing right now, and what do you do?
Well, it goes back to when we were in high school. I played baseball. You were on the golf team. And right before my senior year, I tore my labrum in my shoulder. And that was the end of the line for me for baseball. And that was my passion at the time. Finally, I started educating myself on kind of what happened to my shoulder. And I started getting very intrigued about the body and all the science behind it. And, my main goal was to figure out what happened to me, but then I realized along the way that there's so many different ways that I could turn this around and help people. So that's how the passion sparked, wanting to help people. And I started that I think I was about 19 years old, which was a while ago. And I've been training professionally for a little over 15 years now. I'm a pain-free performance specialist and a personal trainer. I own a gym here in Phoenix, Arizona. This facility has been open for a little over 3 years now, and I just love helping people. My youngest client right now currently is 11 years old, and my oldest is 89. Males, females, very low limitation level, very high limitation level, and kind of everything in between. So, we definitely like to look at the science and, the individual and train that individual for what they are capable of doing. Obviously, their goals are, one of our main factors, but we want to make sure that they're doing things that are going to adequately promote their progress.
Got it. So the group that this entails, I think it's about 700 people right now, a range of abilities, limitations, injuries, all of that. So it's kind of across the board. I would say the majority are somewhere between 30 and 50 years old, but obviously there's people at both ends of that. What do you tend to see in that kind of an age group? Certain, are there things that stand out as, oh, this is a pattern I'm used to seeing, especially with movement and how we kind of live our lives?
Absolutely. Especially in the last 10 to 15 years, there's been a lot of sedentary lifestyle changes kicking in to our movement patterns. With that being said, you see a lot of that rounding or protruding with the shoulders from, typing or looking on your phone or whatever you're doing in front of you. Also with your hips, like being seated for an extended period of time, those hips get really tight. And, that messes with the posture. And the more you mess with your posture, especially over time, and something as specific as a golf swing, posture is huge. So, when we have these postural, limitations, it makes it much more difficult to, swing a golf club, without, the proper, mobility, but also, there tends to be a lot of pain. So clients that I've had, that have played golf in the past, some of the older clientele, they just kind of stopped, and I'm like, what, why? And they say, well, my back hurts by hole 12, or something like that. And I'm just like, we can fix that if you want, like specifically, we can work on that. And I've had a few golfers that, are in their late 50s, early 60s, even 70s, that we've kind of replenished their, ability to play without pain. Their skill levels are, a little bit outside of my domain. That's kind of where you come in. But, as far as the movement, it's every body is different. So working with everybody specifically, the postural issues are kind of a general broad, spectrum, but when it comes to individual movement, there's a lot of similarities. You know, the
Yeah,
postural
yeah.
stuff.
Let's talk about some of those similarities. So, like, I'm, a desk worker. I've moved to a standing desk, which has definitely helped with the lower back pain. But I'm also a lot of the time hunched over my phone, way too much time there. So what does that do? You started to kind of talk about, some of the tightness in the hips, the rounding of the shoulders. Can you just kind of give a little bit more, elaborate on that description a little bit of what some of the impact of that sitting and that kind of internally rotated, movement is?
Okay, so what happens over time, when I was saying, the shoulders round forward, mechanically, your body, like, or anatomically, you're gonna start getting tight in your pec muscles. And then the more tightness you get in here, those pecs, they connect out here in your shoulders. So what they do is they actually pull them inward, forcing all of the muscles up in the upper back and the neck area to kind of be on an overstretch. So essentially, all of those muscles back here, all your postural muscles in the back, they're actually on like overtime, right? They're working overtime. And then all these anterior muscles, including your neck muscles in here, those just go on vacation. And depending on how long you allow these, limitations to develop, the worse it's going to get. So, for example, if you tell somebody that's got that protruding shoulder, issue going on, you tell them to try to squeeze their shoulder blades together, most likely they're not going to be able to get very far, right? And when you're in a, functional movement like a golf swing, or even just get into a dress, it's going to be very hard for you to rotate, and as the pro that you are, you can tell that being able to, I've seen you golf, you're pretty good. So getting into that rotation, you're limiting a lot of your mobility just from the start. And that's just the upper body. The lower body is even more important, because where do you think you get most of that torque? Your legs, right? I mean, moving it all in unison, being able to put all the pieces together. I mean, that's a science in itself. And some of us have it naturally. Some of us, have to work very, very, very hard at it. But with those limitations, you're already putting yourself at a disadvantage just when you step out onto the driving range or the tee box. And then over time, it's just going to get more difficult, more challenging to be able to get into those movements. And it's just going to be that much more frustrating when you're not able to score well or play without pain. So
yeah, I think you see that with a lot of golfers that are told, well, you have to hit this position at the top of the swing, or, something that's based on a kind of an ideal, right? And their bodies just won't allow it. A good pro will recognize that. But there's a lot that, will stick to this is the standard, this is the position that I want you to get in, without getting into here's what we need to do with your body first in order for you to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
You mentioned the lower body, but quickly, can you go kind of through what happens there with the sitting? You mentioned the tight hips, but everything else and how it relates to the golf swing.
Yes. So the tighter your hips get, you turn your pelvis into what's called an anterior pelvic tilt. Like your pelvis turns forward, because over time, those hips are so tight that they're literally pulling your pelvis downward. And then, there's muscles.
And we're talking about those hip flexors, right? And the front. So how would, if I don't know like what my hip flexors are, right? This is all new to me. How can I feel what those are?
So when you stand up, you're not gonna, like, when you stand up and if you try to like even flex your butt or your glutes, you're gonna feel a tightness in here, because they are sitting. Just imagine sitting in a flex bicep position for 8 hours. When you try to straighten your elbows, what's going to happen? This is going to feel really tight, right? Because they were just in that contracted position for however long you're sitting, right? And the more you don't, reverse that, like open it up and strengthen what's on the back of that, then it's just going to continue to get tighter and tighter and tighter. just a snowball effect. And that makes it that much more difficult to open it up. That's why we typically use the, also handy foam roller. And you're going to feel like it's going to feel like a deep tissue massage, like somebody like really, like the tighter you are, the more that's going to hurt. And the more that hurts, the more data it's giving you to tell you how tight you really are and how significant that is.
And then, so you got the tight hips. What about your butt?
So basically, when you're in that same seated position, your glutes are in like an overstretched position. And they
Similar to how you were saying with the shoulders here rotated forward.
Similar, but not exactly the same, because these muscles up here are actually activating to be able to keep your neck and your upper body from falling over. These ones are in the overstretched position and they're just shut off, right? So these muscles are just shut off, and think of it like a band, right? So that muscle, that glute muscle, it just gets on that stretch. So you're in that stretch for an extended period of time and it's just shut off. If you just let it go, like the muscles are just going to lose their elasticity, right? And when you lose the elasticity, they become more difficult and more challenging to fire. And you'll notice, and I mean, I've noticed, especially with clients that have that sedentary lifestyle, they're so tight in the front, and they have very little access to activating their glutes. So even in the most functional movement of your glute, which is a hip extension, like pushing your butt up if you're laying down, they actually feel it in the front, because these muscles are so tight that they're actually feeling a stretch instead of an activation in their butt. So that it's also, I mean, everything that you do, like your body's giving you information. It's what you do with it is how you help yourself.
So, I mean, the good news is, like, as you said, you work with clients, you're able to get them back to kind of a functional range, undo a lot of that damage. Can you walk me through that process and kind of what that looks like? Obviously, it's going to be specific to the individual, but just in kind of general terms, what are you looking to do there? And how can, if we're starting a daily movement practice, how can we address some of those issues that a lot of us are probably going to be experiencing?
Okay, so going back to, the information that your body gives you, say you have tight hips, right? That means something on the other side is weak. So to be able to correct it, you need to loosen what's tight, and then you need to strengthen what's on the other side to balance it out, because over time you get over and underactive muscles because one side's doing more, the other side's not doing anything. What you need to do is balance that out, because what happens over time is, especially if you're doing, explosive movements like a golf swing, those imbalances are going to surface themselves through your joint. So basically, if you think of one side, like think of a joint, right? And we got different types of joints, but generally speaking, we got a joint. We got muscle on this side, we got muscle on this side. This one's working overtime. This one's not working at all, right? Mm-hmm. That joint is the one that is going to deal with all of the instability, right? So your joint is going to be the one, like a lot of golfers end up with like shoulder and, hip issues, even elbow issues, because of that specific purpose. And, when we break down the joints, you break down the muscles that connect to them. So to start off, you would just, basically see what's going on. Like go around, collect the data of that individual and say, okay, you got really, really, really tight neck and really tight, tight pec muscles. You also got really tight hip flexors. We're gonna not only start just breaking away the layers of that tightness, but we're also going to strengthen what's on the other side of it. So for example, easiest example would be like a bicep and a tricep movement. So like if you had tightness here, mm-hmm. right, you would work it first on loosening that and then strengthening your tricep to then support your elbow, because your bicep flexes your elbow, your tricep extends it, and based on other things, but generally that's how it works. So different joints and different muscles have different functions, but very, broad spectrum. That's what we're trying to accomplish, is to loosen what's tight and to strengthen what's weak.
So let's start with the loosening. What are some ways that we can do that?
So I have clients just pick up some like myofascial release balls. So just like some foam balls, right? Like they have different sizes for, different surface areas, different densities to dig in a little bit harder. To start out, you would probably want something on a little bit of the lighter side, because it's most likely going to be a little tender. And, if you have the tenderness, that's your body saying, all right, this is what we need to work on. These are tight points. And they could even be points like you're gonna find things that you didn't even know that you had. Like, sure, that, oh, my neck hurts, daily. I have chronic neck pain, or I have chronic back pain. But you're gonna start getting you're gonna start unlocking why. And there's a lot of information that's gonna tell itself to you. So for example, if you get yourself on a wall and you open up and then just kind of use your body weight to push into a wall, and then just kind of follow the fibers across this way. So, I mean, you can even do it if you're just starting out. You could use your own, your own pressure. And if you got tightness here, just by this, you're going to have even more when you push into a solid surface. So you could start there. You could start here in your pec major, and then you could also go down your pec minor, because all this tissue is most likely going to be what's pulling your shoulder forward, and even causing any impingement in the mobility of your shoulder. But also you can go into the back, and there's a lot of muscles back there. We don't have to break down all of them, but there's a lot of posterior rotator cuff muscles that could be tugging on the other side, and they're just in war, over each other. One's tight because it's weak and just shut down like that. The other one's like angry because it's working so hard in that stretch position. So we just want to get them to be balanced so they don't tug on your joint or on your neck or anything close to your spine. So just honestly, start out with rolling with the ball. You can do it. Lightest is going to be just doing it with your hand pressure. Then you can move into pushing against the wall, and then do the same thing in your back. For the lower body, it's a little bit easier to access with the foam roller. So just trying to get to a point where I can see the floor. So if you take a foam roller, there's, again, different densities. You're going to want to start with a lighter density if you're just starting out. So if you just take this and you start in the front, that's where you're probably going to get the most information or most feedback. So if you just go on your forearms, and then you try to get everything lined up. So you don't want to be all here and all over the place. We want to be in a good postural position with everything that we're trying to do. So if you're just sitting here and you start kind of at the hip, right on that pelvic bone in here. If you start there and then you move your way down, all the way down to the top part of your knee, anything soft tissue you want to search for, and then the more tenderness you get, the more you're going to want to work that out over time, because that's going to help. You're going to notice that it's probably going to hurt at first, just like a deep tissue massage. But you're going to notice that there's going to be some alleviation in a little bit of pain, but at the same time, you're going to need to strengthen it, not just loosen. If you loosen, going back to what we said earlier, you just loosen, the pain's going to come back. Right? If you don't strengthen what's on the other side. But that's a good place to start. You could break it down also into your glutes. These adductor muscles, these inner thigh muscles, these are one of the secret muscles that I like to really focus on with individuals, especially ones that sit a lot, because these muscles, unless you're riding horses, they don't get a lot of activation, right? So they're most likely going to be tight. And what they do is they kind of act as like a third hamstring, and they actually pull down on your pelvis too. So you can get the back pain stemming from that. So, pretty severe case, like you see an older person, they have kind of this thing kind of going on.
Yep.
That stemmed from that adductor magnus muscle. So that inner thigh muscle, but we could break that down further.
Interesting. So are people surprised when they come in with, say, like lower back pain, that your focus is not actually the lower back?
I mean, don't quote me on this, but I mean, from my experience, I'd say 85 to 95% of the time when people have pain or impingement, it's the source of that pain or impingement is not where they think. So when they tell me what's going on in a consultation, and I take them through a movement assessment and some functional stuff, and then I'm like, okay, this is what I see. This is probably what you felt. Let's put those together, and these are your goals. So we want to put all of this in the box, but this is where we're going to start. We're going to start outside the box. And they're just kind of like, what do you mean? I go, I'll educate you as we go. But if you got something that's tight here, that's basically, if you take, I use the rubber band all the time. So if you have something tight here and something way down here is feeling that pain or impingement, if we loosen that up, then that'll help you move freer, and that impingement and pain will loosen up, but we still need to strengthen it. So we just kind of go through the individual pieces. So, as a coach, I want to make sure that they're understanding what the information that I'm trying to relay to them is and why it is beneficial for their body. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of times it's people tell me what they need, but when I hear that, that's what they want. And I kind of go through the back door and educate them so we get to where what they need, we both understand the same thing.
So talked kind of about the loosening up, so you can use kind of the myofascial release. What about stretching, bands, any of that? What do you think?
Yeah, so I would first go after with like the fascial release, mm-hmm. But then you can go, like if it's before like a training session, if you're doing resistance training, you don't typically want to do a lot of static or isometric stuff. Mm-hmm. You would want to go into a dynamic. And that would be
where you're holding a posture for an extended period of time.
Correct. So there's two main forms of stretching. You got dynamic stretching, which is essentially stretching while you're moving. So this is an example here, like that. So you'd be stretching in here, but I'm not holding for more than 3 to 5 seconds, basically enough to get the stretch. Whereas an isometric or a static stretch, you're going to be holding that for 30 seconds on up. But you wouldn't want to do that before a training session. You would want to do the dynamic before, but not the static. So the dynamic stretching would be, right after you open everything up, then you can just start loosening and getting it primed for movement.
Got it. So once we've got it primed for that movement, now it's time to strengthen the other side. What are some options that maybe we can start with kind of the glutes? And, as you're saying, a lot of people would actually feel that glute bridge in their anterior hip flexors. Glute activation, right? Like how do you make sure that if you're trying to get somebody to do something like that they're actually feeling it in the correct place and able to make that mind muscle connection?
Okay, so I can demonstrate a exercise that basically is going to be the one that's going to get after it the most directly. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times people, like when they perform things, and when I tell them to do stuff initially during a consultation, I have them move how they would normally move, and we make adjustments and corrections later. So I would see a lot of people with their feet, and they're like super offset. So I put them next to a wall. So that's going to force their feet to be square, right? And then you get them here. And then the closer your feet are to your hips, most likely you're going to be able to get those glute muscles activated. So if we even get them like laying here, but the trick is not just lifting up and down here, because you could use, like, your body's going to try to make things as easy as possible. So if we push down through your feet, so like the balls of your feet and the heels, at the same time you're pushing up, and then kind of go really slow. So I have them put their hands on their butt and then kind of push up. And then as they're pushing up, kind of push out. So then just have them hold here and see what they feel. Because one person doing this could feel everything here, but another person could feel it way up here. So we just really dig in to their brain and use, different ways of thinking, like pushing the knees forward. That could trigger the glutes to fire, or for them at least to recognize that they fire, because they could be firing, but they just don't have that mind muscle connection yet. So that's why I have them put their hands on their butt so they can actually feel the contraction. And then hopefully their brain recognizes that as activation over time. May not be the first time, but then if we go into, that extension at the top, and then just kind of have them do that as homework, the more aware you are of your connectivity and your muscles, the more you're going to get at a quicker pace. It's going to be a lot more connection with whatever you do, because I get the question, especially in the beginning, where am I supposed to feel this? Or what is this supposed to do for me? Or anything in that realm. So trying, like, that goes back to the education, like getting us what I got in here, what I see, being able to translate that to their brain, from their brain out to their muscles, and have that connection bond, because that's the most important part. Doesn't matter what I see and what I have, if I can't get it from here to your glutes or whatever we're working, then I'm not doing my job as the coach. Like, my job is to get it from here to there, and however I need to do that based on personality or learning styles. I mean, there's so many different variables, but as directly as possible for that individual is what we're going for.
Yeah, it's there's a big crossover there with golf instructors and the different kind of movement vocabularies they'll use to try to get somebody to make a movement in a certain way, and sometimes it takes
verbal cues. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so that was the glutes. What about our posterior neck, back? What can we do there once we've got this area loosened up?
Okay, so and again, not a lot of people have that connectivity. Like, they know that their neck hurts, right? They get the pain sensors, that they know that it hurts, but they don't necessarily know how to activate those muscles to correct the posture. So, say they're in here a lot. If we can't be able to connect to those muscles to be able to kind of bring them down and back to where we're sitting upright instead of here, these muscles are going to need to be activated. So you can do that. You can use I like to use gravity at the beginning, because they're, people aren't trying to compensate based on, trying to lift a bunch of weight. And these muscles, in their retraction function, a lot of them don't have a lot of capacity for a lot of weight. So, I mean, you could use 2 to 5 pound weights and it'll feel much heavier than that. So I have them just use gravity and kind of get onto the ground. And I call these YTIs. And I mean, it's a pretty broad exercise. A lot of trainers, a lot of physical therapists use it just for the activation. But basically, you get in a Y position with your body. Make sure your head's down, because you don't want too much contraction here. Thumbs are up like this. And then literally all you do is you lift up like that, but you're not lifting your whole body. You're just lifting those arms. And then you do the same thing straight out to the side. These are your T's. And you're just trying to squeeze your shoulder blades together. Like that. And then you got eyes like that. So
where's your thumb pointed on that last one?
This one is down. So you're up this way. You're just going to get a little bit more range of motion in your shoulder if you're in this position. This one, you can kind of go this way or this way. I like this way just because you get a little external rotation. So coming back like that and then lifting up, you're just going to get a little bit more connection to your middle back, but basically those three different positions is going to activate, and you'll be able to start to feel what those muscles should feel like when you're sitting up properly. You could use a band to do pull aparts like this. So the biggest thing on this is not just trying to move the band, because they're still in this position, you're not going to get access. Right. So if you sit up straight and just try to pull the band as far back as you can, but using your shoulder blades, not your hands.
Right.
Because
they're like a rep range that you're looking at for those?
Honestly, just starting out, one to be able to feel it
one good one.
One good one. I mean, I always tell people I'd rather you do one good rep at a time, 5 or 10 sets, instead of, all right, I want you to do one set of 15 crappy ones. I don't care how you do it. I just want you to do. I never say that. So I would much rather the quality be over the quantity. So, because that's going to translate into everything. Because the more quality reps they can do, then they can build into endurance, and those quality reps are going to be able to do more of them, but with quality instead of breaking down. And when you break down, that's when you start getting vulnerable for the injury stuff. So
a couple of things that I want to follow up on. One, so I recommended a daily movement practice, something that people do every day, be 10 minutes to 30 minutes. What are the benefits of doing a daily practice as opposed to something you're doing, maybe 2-3 times a week at most?
Well, from a fundamental level, it's going to get much more of your mind-muscle connection. And what we were just discussing, I mean, the connectivity, the more you're aware of your movement and the more you can access what you're supposed to feel during those movements, it's just going to expedite how you can implement them into your everyday movements, and B, if you're trying to do something as specific as a golf swing, then the implementation process is going to be you're going to have a much better outcome at a much quicker rate, because you're going to be able to understand, like we were talking earlier, you get the data from your body, if, oh, that's tight. Okay, well, is that really tight or is that an imbalance? Like being able to be more aware, because, there's misconceptions on what pain really is. And the more you understand your body and connect to it, the more you're going to minimize that confusion, and you're going to enhance. That's right. That feels right. Like, oh, I feel my glutes contract now. I did that enough times to where I can actually feel the activation the way that it's actually functionally intended to, versus like, oh, well, I saw a video that, if I do this exercise, my lats are going to just get super wide. But if you don't know how to activate it properly, sure, that exercise is going to be able to, enhance that. But if you don't have the connection, most likely you're just going to be doing a bicep curl, and you're going to be wondering why you're not getting wider in your lats, depending on what you're going for. But it's all about that connection.
So as a pain-free specialist, I wanted to get your thoughts in particular on this. A lot of golfers right now, and golfers that I talk to, are working on their speed. So a lot of people jump kind of right into the speed training. They get these systems, say, that are very good systems themselves. But I've seen, anecdotally, I know of at least a few players who got started down that route and quickly injured something, had to stop, and that progress was lost, or they even went backwards as a result. So what would you recommend for somebody that wants to get to that level, to be able to swing faster, more efficiently, but your caution to them, I guess, prior to working on anything like that?
I mean, there's multiple things that could happen. I mean, I always use the connection as of building a house. If you just try to build a huge house without really focusing on the importance of the foundation,
Right.
at some point that house is going to crumble. So back to what you're asking, making sure that you're focusing on mobility and, doing this stuff on your off days and even in combination with, to allow your body the movement capability to be able to do that. Because think about just like going in and not warming your muscles up and getting you primed for an exercise, and then you just try to go like super crazy, and then, oh my gosh, my pec ripped open or my shoulder fell off. Like your body's not ready for that kind of intensity. But if you prime it, if you get it ready, you're going to get stronger. And obviously we want to promote people getting stronger. The golfer wants to be strong on all three planes of motion. So you got your frontal, your sagittal, and then your transverse. So we could break that down later, but basically the golf swing is a lot of transverse and a lot of twisting, but it's also working on all three planes in some capacity, whether it's, full contraction or just stability. There's a lot of stability going on in a golf swing. All the parts that aren't moving, they're stabilizing something. So there's a lot of pieces, which mean there could be a lot of breakdowns if not done properly or carefully. I mean, and if you get careless, that's when things are going to start falling apart. So if you're going to go down that road, I would definitely recommend making sure you're balancing your mobility and making sure you're getting enough recovery too. Because if you're going 1,000% every day, you're going to run into something. But,
and you're probably not going to progress very well if you're not giving your body time to recover.
Your body needs time to recover. Mm-hmm. So making sure you can find a good balance between, activation, recovery, and balancing out the holes with mobility and releasing and making sure your body's able to move. Because if you're sore and you try to do, say for example, you hit 150 miles an hour on your swing speed or something crazy, right?
That's crazy. Yeah. But
yeah, but I'm just trying to use an extreme here so you can understand. And then the next day, say this is like your first or second day of the week, you're super sore, but then you try to do that again. What's going to happen? Like your muscles aren't recovered and they're not ready for that. So then most likely you have a very high vulnerability at, impinging or possibly even tearing something. And if you do that, you're going to be out of the training for a lot longer than just that recovery day. So, kind of risk reward type of thing, but just listen to your body. That would be my number one thing. But the more aware you are with your body, the more you'll be able to listen to it when it's trying to tell you something.
That's a perfect place to end it. I know you've got clients coming in, and I also know you've got a full client load, but if people want to learn more about you, or maybe they're in the Phoenix area, how could they do that?
DKFitnesstrainer.com is the website that you actually helped me put together. So I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
So that's got our facility on it. It's got kind of the programming, and then it's got my contact on there as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks, brother. I really appreciate it. I know that the people watching this will hopefully have learned a lot, and would definitely love to do this again, going in a little bit deeper on some of those topics, especially as we get into, maybe more of that power training and things
absolutely.
like that.
And again, this is very broad, there's so much information that we could break down into finer tuned details, but just to get the awareness. But we don't want to overwhelm individuals with too much at first, because that just seems like it's an impossible journey and it's going to take forever to get there. We take one piece at a time and get good at recognizing how to succeed one piece at a time. Ultimately, that piece is going to turn into a house.
Incremental gains.
Yep. Foundation first.